Rain hammered against French windows as lightning illuminated the silhouette of a woman standing alone in the doorway of a Beverly Hills mansion. One hand cradled her swollen belly, the other clutched a single suitcase. Behind her, laughter echoed from within the warmth she was no longer welcome to share. Some say the most dangerous creature is not the one that attacks without provocation, but the one with nothing left to lose. The one who has been betrayed by those sworn to protect them, the one who has been forced to discover exactly what they're capable of when everything is taken away. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reconstruction, building something better from the ashes of what was lost. And sometimes, the most exquisite revenge isn't just taking back what was stolen, but transforming it into something the thief could never have imagined. This is not a story about falling. This is a story about rising. The autumn rain pounded against the tall windows of the Anderson mansion in Beverly Hills, casting long shadows across marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Inside the East Wing nursery, Sophia Wellington Anderson stood before a half-finished mural of an enchanted forest, one hand resting on her 6-month pregnant belly, the other holding a small, stuffed elephant. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered, a gentle smile crossing her face as she felt a kick in response. "I think it's missing something, too." At 32, Sophia possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads intelligent hazel eyes, chestnut hair that fell in soft waves to her shoulders, and a quiet confidence that came from years of professional success. Before marrying Richard Anderson 3 years ago, she had been one of Wall Street's rising stars, a financial analyst with an uncanny ability to predict market shifts. Richard had been a client, then an admirer, then a suitor who promised her the world. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the 15,000-square-foot mansion. Richard was home early, unusual for a Wednesday. Sophia placed the stuffed elephant in the custom-built crib, a gift from Richard's business partner, after their pregnancy announcement had made the society pages, and headed downstairs. Richard Anderson stood in the grand foyer, shaking rain from his tailored Armani coat. At 45, he embodied power and privilege, 6 feet tall, with salt and pepper hair that added to his distinguished appearance, a face that regularly appeared in Fortune and Forbes, and the confident posture of a man accustomed to getting his way. As CEO of Anderson Global, he controlled real estate developments across 3 continents, with a personal fortune estimated at just over $2 billion. "You're home early," Sophia said, descending the curved staircase. Richard barely looked up. "Meeting canceled. I'll be in my office. Don't disturb me." The coldness in his voice wasn't new. Over the past few months, as her pregnancy had progressed, Richard had grown increasingly distant. The romantic dinners had stopped. The weekend getaways to their houses in Aspen or the Hamptons had been replaced with urgent business meetings. The calls throughout the day to check on her had dwindled to nothing. Sophia had attributed it to stress. Anderson Global was launching a major development in Dubai, and Richard had been working obsessively on securing the right permissions and partnerships. She'd told herself things would improve once the baby arrived. As Richard disappeared into his office, his iPad chimed with an incoming message. He'd left it on the entryway table. Sophia wouldn't normally look, but something intuition perhaps made her glance down at the screen. The message preview made her blood run cold. "Victoria can't wait to feel you inside me again tonight. Once you get rid of her, we won't have to sneak around anymore." Attached was a photo that left nothing to the imagination, a young woman with platinum blonde hair and surgically enhanced features, wearing nothing but a necklace Sophia recognized. It was the diamond pendant Richard had claimed was lost last month, a pendant he'd originally bought for Sophia on their 2nd anniversary, her hands trembling. Sophia picked up the iPad. Richard's fingerprint security was easy to bypass. She'd seen him enter his code countless times. The full conversation thread with Victoria Adams, his new executive assistant, revealed months of messages, photos, and explicit videos. But what shattered Sophia's world weren't the sexual exchanges, but the calculations about her. "Richard, my lawyer, says with the prenup, I won't have to give her much. Once the divorce is final, we can go public. Victoria. What about the baby Richard? I'll offer child support, but nothing excessive. She won't fight it. She's too soft. Victoria. Good. I want that master suite. And I'm throwing out all her clothes. I've already picked new furniture. The messages dated back 4 months around the time Sophia had announced her pregnancy. Without thinking, Sophia took her phone and photographed several of the most damning exchanges. Then, still in shock, she walked to Richard's office and pushed open the heavy mahogany door without knocking. Richard was on the phone, his back to the door as he gazed out at the rain-soaked garden. Yes, everything's on schedule. I'll tell her tonight, and she'll be gone by morning. The movers can come for her things on. He turned and saw Sophia standing there, iPad in hand, tears streaming down her face. His expression changed from shock to cold calculation in an instant. He ended the call without a goodbye. I see you've been snooping, he said, voice eerily calm. How long? Sophia's voice cracked. How long have you been sleeping with her? Richard leaned back in his leather chair, studying Sophia as if she were an underperforming investment. 6 months, since before you got pregnant. The baby, Afrin. You said you wanted. I made a mistake. Richard cut her off. Victoria is young, ambitious. She understands what I need. This pregnancy was your idea, not mine. Each word struck like a physical blow. Sophia struggled to breathe. You're throwing away 3 years of marriage for your assistant, someone 10 years younger who's clearly after your money. Richard's laugh was cruel. At least she's honest about what she wants. You pretended to love me, but we both know you married me for financial security. You got what you wanted, a comfortable life. An Anderson baby. But I've grown bored. Sophia, it happens. I never pretended, Sophia whispered, one hand protectively covering her belly. I gave up my career for you. I loved you. Past tense, appropriate. Richard stood up, buttoning his suit jacket in a gesture of finality. My lawyer has prepared the divorce papers. You'll find the terms more than fair. I'll give you a week to move out. And a week, Sophia interrupted, disbelief overtaking her shock. I'm 6 months pregnant with your child. Richard's face hardened. Actually, I've reconsidered. I want you out tonight. Tonight, Richard. It's pouring rain. It's after 8. Not my problem. He walked past her into the hallway, raising his voice. Jackson. The head of security appeared within seconds. Yes, Mr. Anderson. Ms. Wellington will be leaving us tonight. Please ensure she takes only her personal belongings, clothing, jewelry that I've specifically gifted to her, and her vehicle. Nothing else leaves this house without my explicit approval. Jackson, a former military man who'd worked for the Andersons for decades, looked uncomfortable but nodded. Richard, you can't do this, Sophia pleaded, following him into the hallway. Where am I supposed to go? A hotel, a friend's house. Again, not my concern. Richard checked his watch. I have dinner plans. You have 3 hours to pack. Anything left behind will be disposed of. As if on cue, the front door opened, and Victoria Adams stepped in, shaking water from an umbrella. In person, she was even more striking than in her photos, tall, no more than 28, with the kind of beauty that came from expensive maintenance. Her eyes widened in mock surprise at seeing Sophia. Oh, I didn't realize you'd be here. Her voice dripped with false concern. Richard told me you'd be visiting your mother this evening. Did he now? Sophia's shock was hardening into something else, a cold, clarifying anger. Richard placed his hand on Victoria's lower back. Change of plans. Sophia was just leaving permanently. We've decided to accelerate our timeline. Victoria's practiced pout transformed into a smile. Thank God, this place desperately needs a woman's touch. No offense, Sophia, but beige is so boring. The casual cruelty stunned Sophia into silence. This woman who she'd met at company functions, who had sympathetically asked about her pregnancy symptoms, had been sleeping with her husband and planning to redecorate her home. "I'll go pack," Sophia said finally, her voice steadier than she expected. As she climbed the stairs, she heard Victoria's stage whisper, "Should I help her make sure she doesn't take anything valuable?" "Good idea," Richard replied. "Jackson, go with them." The next 2 hours passed in a nightmarish blur. Sophia moved through the walk-in closet and bathroom of the master suite she'd shared with Richard, packing essentials into 2 suitcases while Victoria lounged on the bed, commenting on Sophia's basic taste and occasionally holding up an item to ask Richard, who stood in the doorway. Should we keep this? Most painful was packing the few baby items she'd already purchased: onesies, the stuffed elephant, a silver-plated baby brush. Victoria scrutinized each item, allowing Sophia to take them only after Richard nodded his approval. "What about my prenatal vitamins?" Sophia asked, her voice hollow. Victoria rolled her eyes. "Drugstores exist, honey." By the time Sophia finished, the rain had intensified into a downpour. Jackson, looking increasingly uncomfortable, carried her suitcases to her car, the Audi SUV Richard had bought when they learned she was pregnant, chosen for its safety ratings. "I need to go to the bathroom before I leave," Sophia said, her hand pressed against her lower back where pain had been building. "Make it quick," Richard said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. In the powder room, Sophia splashed cold water on her face and tried to control her breathing. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, with mascara smudged under red-rimmed eyes. But behind the devastation, Sophia saw something else emerging: determination. She reached into her coat pocket for a tissue and felt something hard, a USB drive she'd forgotten about. 3 weeks ago, Richard had asked her to transfer some personal financial documents for him, and she'd saved copies as he'd instructed. He'd never asked for the drive back. Without thinking twice, she slipped it into her bra. When she emerged, Richard was holding her purse, which he'd apparently decided to inspect. "Your credit cards have been deactivated," he said, handing it back. "You can keep your personal bank account. Of course, there should be enough to tide you over until the settlement." Sophia knew her personal account held less than $5,000. She'd transferred most of her savings into their joint accounts after the marriage, accounts Richard had now certainly emptied or frozen. "One more thing," Richard said as they reached the front door. He held out his hand. "The house keys." Sophia removed the Anderson mansion keys from her keychain and placed them in his palm, careful not to touch him. "Your wedding and engagement rings too," Victoria added, stepping forward. "Those weren't personal gifts. They're Anderson family jewels." Richard nodded in agreement. Sophia looked down at the 3-carat diamond engagement ring and platinum wedding band. "The prenup specifies they're mine regardless of how the marriage ends," she said quietly. "Sue me then," Richard replied with a smirk. For a moment, Sophia considered fighting. The rings were worth over $1 million combined, but something told her to choose her battles. She slid them off and placed them on the marble entryway table. Victoria immediately snatched them up, sliding the engagement ring onto her own finger. "A little big, but nothing a jeweler can't fix." As Jackson opened the front door, the full force of the storm hit them: driving rain, wind that bent the carefully manicured palm trees, occasional flashes of lightning. Sophia stepped out without an umbrella, the rain instantly soaking her hair and clothes. "Sophia," Richard called as she reached her car. She turned, a flicker of hope that he'd had a change of heart. Instead, he tossed something small that she caught reflexively: a hotel key card. "The Beverly Wilshire, one night, paid for. Consider it my last gift to you." Victoria laughed and slid her arm through Richard's as they watched Sophia from the shelter of the doorway. In that moment, standing in the pouring rain, one hand on her pregnant belly, Sophia felt something crystallize within her. Not just anger or heartbreak, but an absolute clarity of purpose. The old Sophia, the trusting wife who'd surrendered her career and identity, was gone, washed away in the rain. As she drove through the gates of the estate for what she thought would be the last time, she didn't look back at the mansion. Instead, She pressed the button to call the one person who might still be in her corner. "Michael, it's Sophia. I need your help." As the gates closed behind her, she didn't see Richard watching from the upstairs window. Victoria already unbuttoning his shirt, both of them unaware that their calculated cruelty had just awakened something far more dangerous than a scorned wife. They had created an enemy with nothing left to lose, an intimate knowledge of Richard's secrets, and a sudden burning desire for justice. The rain continued to fall, washing away tears Sophia refused to shed anymore. The game had changed, and despite appearances, Sophia Wellington Anderson was not leaving defeated, she was merely retreating to plan her counterattack. The Beverly Wilshire Hotel stood like a beacon in the stormy night, its elegant facade and uniformed doorman offering a semblance of normalcy that felt surreal to Sophia. She handed her keys to the valet, numb to the luxury that would have impressed her in another lifetime. Inside, the marble-floored lobby bustled with well-heeled travelers, oblivious to her personal catastrophe. At the front desk, the clerk's eyes widened slightly at her bedraggled appearance, designer clothes soaked through. Makeup streaked, but professional training prevailed. "Mrs. Anderson, we have you in a deluxe suite for one night." Mr. Anderson called ahead. Of course he did, Sophia thought bitterly. Richard always managed appearances, even when destroying someone's life. "Is there anything else you need?" the clerk asked, clearly noting her lack of luggage beyond 2 suitcases. "Privacy," Sophia replied simply. In the suite, Sophia mechanically went through the motions of survival, hanging her wet clothes, taking a hot shower, ordering room service she couldn't eat. She sat on the edge of the king-size bed, hands resting on her swollen belly, and finally allowed herself to fully process the evening's events. 3 hours ago, she had been Sophia Anderson, pregnant wife of a billionaire, decorating a nursery in their mansion. Now she was effectively homeless, with limited funds, cut off from the life she'd built over 3 years. And her child, what would happen to her baby in this nightmare? The suite's phone rang, interrupting her spiral of despair. "Mrs. Anderson, there's a Mr. Reynolds here to see you. He says you're expecting him." "Michael," relief flooded through her. "Yes, please send him up." Minutes later, Michael Reynolds stood in her doorway, his tall frame filling the entrance. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built his success from nothing. His dark hair was damp from the rain, his blue eyes concerned behind horn-rimmed glasses. "Sophia," he said, his deep voice filled with worry. "What happened?" Before she could answer, emotion overwhelmed her, and for the first time that night, Sophia broke down. Michael crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into a protective embrace. "It's Richard," she managed between sobs. "He's been cheating. He threw me out. Victoria." "Breathe," Michael instructed gently, guiding her to sit on the sofa. "Start from the beginning." Michael Reynolds had been Sophia's friend since their Columbia Business School days. While she'd gone to Wall Street, he'd chosen corporate law, eventually founding Reynolds Legal, a boutique firm specializing in high-net-worth divorces and financial malfeasance. He'd been best man at Sophia and Richard's wedding, though his toast had been notably lacking in warmth toward the groom. Over the next hour, Sophia recounted the evening's events, showing Michael the photos she'd taken of Richard's messages with Victoria. Michael's expression darkened with each new detail. "He can't do this," Michael said finally. "The prenup has clear provisions for spousal support, especially with a child involved. We'll file for emergency support tomorrow." Sophia shook her head. "You don't understand Richard. He'll drag this out for years. He has the resources to bury me in legal fees, delay court dates, hide assets. I've handled worse," Michael assured her. "With the evidence of infidelity?" "No!" Sophia interrupted, something hardening in her voice. "I don't want to just survive this. Michael, I want my life back, and I want Richard to experience exactly what he did to me, to lose everything in an instant." Michael studied her face. Revenge isn't a legal strategy. Sophia? Maybe not. Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out the USB drive. But this might be... Michael's eyebrows rose as Sophia explained about the financial documents. He plugged the drive into his laptop, and they spent the next 2 hours reviewing its contents. The further they dug, the more Michael's expression changed from concern to disbelief to calculating interest. "Holy shit," he whispered, staring at a spreadsheet detailing offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Richard's been systematically hiding assets, tens of millions in shell companies. And these transactions? He pointed to a series of wire transfers. Classic tax evasion patterns. But the real bombshell came in a folder labeled Westlake Acquisition. Inside were emails between Richard and members of the Beverly Hills Zoning Board, detailing what appeared to be bribes to approve a controversial development project. "He's paying off officials to rezone protected land," Michael said, whistling low. "The Westlake property is currently valued at maybe $10 million, but with commercial zoning, it jumps to over $100 million. He's committing securities fraud too. He's planning to buy the land through a private holding company, get the zoning changed using his political connections, then sell it to Anderson Global at the inflated price." Sophia stared at the screen. "Can we use this?" "Use it!" Michael laughed without humor. "Sophia, this is enough to trigger SEC investigations, IRS audits, and possibly criminal charges. But," he hesitated, "if we go to the authorities, it becomes public. Anderson Global's stock would tank. Thousands of people could lose their jobs, including people you care about." Sophia thought of Jackson, the security guard who'd looked so uncomfortable following Richard's cruel orders, and the household staff who had always treated her with kindness. She thought of Richard's younger brother, James, who worked for the company but had always seemed separate from Richard's cutthroat methods. "There has to be another way," she said. "Something more targeted." Michael closed the laptop, a contemplative expression on his face. "There might be, but first, you need a safe place to stay. The guest apartment above my garage is yours for as long as you need it." Sophia started to protest, but Michael raised a hand. "It's private, secure, and has its own entrance. No one will know you're there unless you want them to." 2 hours later, settled in Michael's comfortable guest apartment in Brentwood, Sophia felt the first stirrings of hope. The space was modest but elegant, one bedroom, a small kitchen, a living area with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Most importantly, it felt safe. "Get some rest," Michael advised before leaving her. "Tomorrow, we start planning." Sleep eluded Sophia. Instead, she found herself standing at the window, watching the storm finally subside, replaced by the glittering lights of Los Angeles below. One hand rested on her belly, feeling the occasional movements of her child. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to her unborn baby. "Better than okay, I promise." The next morning brought clarity and purpose. After a brief, restless sleep, Sophia woke at dawn and began making lists of assets she could access, friends she could trust, information she remembered about Anderson Global's operations. Michael arrived at 9 with breakfast and news. "I've been making calls. Richard's already frozen your joint accounts and credit cards. As you predicted, he's also put a rush on the divorce filing. His lawyers will likely serve you today if they can find you." "Let them try," Sophia said, sipping the herbal tea Michael had brought. "What else?" "Your personal account at First Republic is still accessible. It's not much, but it's something. And, Sophia prompted when he hesitated. "Richard's telling people you had a breakdown, that the pregnancy hormones made you unstable, and you left him." Michael's jaw tightened. Victoria's already moved into the mansion. Rather than the pain she expected, Sophia felt a cold, clarifying anger. "Perfect." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Perfect. Let him think I'm broken. The lower his guard, the better." Over the next 3 days, Sophia and Michael developed what they came to call the strategy. During the day, Michael maintained his normal work schedule at Reynolds Legal while using his extensive network to quietly gather information. Sophia remained in the apartment, analyzing Richard's financial documents and making plans. What emerged was a picture of a man whose empire was far more vulnerable than anyone suspected. Despite his billionaire status, Richard Anderson was cash poor and overextended. The Dubai project was behind schedule and over budget. Several loans were coming due, and most critically, Richard had leveraged almost everything to secure funding for the Westlake project, the crown jewel that would either cement his legacy or destroy it. On the fourth day, an unexpected visitor arrived. Sophia was reviewing documents when a knock at the door startled her. Cautiously, she checked the security camera Michael had installed. James Anderson stood on the porch, looking nervous. Sophia hesitated, then opened the door. James, Richard's younger brother by 5 years. James had always been the softer, more thoughtful Anderson. Where Richard commanded, James collaborated. Where Richard bulldozed, James built bridges. Thank God, James said, genuine relief crossing his features. I've been looking everywhere for you. Are you okay? Sophia gestured him inside, guarded but curious. How did you find me? Process of elimination, James admitted. You weren't at any hotels. Your friends claimed not to have seen you, but Michael's assistant got weird when I asked if he'd heard from you. He paused in studying her. You look good, considering my husband threw me out in the rain while I'm carrying his child. Sophia's voice was sharper than intended. James winced. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I had no idea until it was done. Richard told the family you'd left him some bullshit about you having an affair. Of course he did. Sophia wasn't surprised. Why are you here? James. James ran a hand through his hair, the same nervous gesture Richard had, though on James it seemed genuine rather than calculated. Because what Richard did was wrong, and because he hesitated. There's something you should know. Over the next hour, James revealed information that changed everything. The Anderson mansion, the 15,000 square foot estate Richard had thrown her out of, wasn't just another asset. It was Anderson family property, passed down for generations, with a complex ownership structure. According to their grandfather's will, the property couldn't be sold without unanimous consent from all family shareholders. Richard needs to sell it, James explained. He's over-leveraged on the Westlake deal. The Dubai project is hemorrhaging money. He needs cash. Fast. But he needs family approval, Sophia finished, understanding dawning. James nodded. Mother would never agree. Normally, that mansion was her childhood home. But Richard's convinced her you abandoned him during a high-risk pregnancy, that you're mentally unstable. She's heartbroken for him. And if she knew the truth, James smiled for the first time, she'd cut him off without a cent. Mother's old-fashioned that way. Loyalty means everything to her. As James was leaving, he paused at the door. One more thing. Richard's hosting a gala this Saturday at the mansion, a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. But really, it's to announce the Westlake development. Every power player in LA will be there. And he hesitated. He's planning to introduce Victoria as his fiancée. After James left, Sophia called Michael immediately. We need to accelerate the timeline, she said without preamble. The gala is our moment. Michael arrived that evening with Thai food and a revelation of his own. I found the buyer for the mansion, he said, opening containers of pad Thai. Anonymous LLC, offering 30% below market value because Richard's desperate. The deal closes Friday, just before the gala. Sophia's mind raced. Who's behind the LLC? Michael's smile was slow and predatory. Currently, some offshore investors, but they're looking for a partner with liquidity and vision. Honey, how much? 10 million buy-in? Sophia thought of her personal account with less than $5,000 and laughed without humor. I'm a bit short. Not necessarily. Michael laid out a stack of papers on the coffee table. These are the whistleblower forms for the SEC and IRS. With the evidence you have on Richard's financial crimes, you could be entitled to up to 30% of any funds recovered. Sophia stared at the forms. How much could that be? Conservative estimate tens of millions, but it would take years and it would be public. Sophia shook her head. Too long, and I don't want to destroy the company. There's another option. Michael hesitated. My firm has an investment arm. We could front the money, structure it as a loan against the future whistleblower proceeds. You'd essentially be partnering with us to buy the mansion through the LLC. Why would you do that? Michael's gaze was steady. Because I believe in justice. And because I've watched Richard Anderson steamroll people for years, it's time someone stood up to him. The unspoken hung between them that perhaps Michael's motivations weren't entirely professional, that perhaps he'd always seen something in Sophia that went beyond friendship. But now wasn't the time to explore that complexity. Let's do it, Sophia said, extending her hand. Partners. The next day, they executed the plan. Michael's firm transferred funds to the anonymous LLC, paperwork was filed, signatures obtained remotely. By Thursday evening, everything was in place. On Friday morning, Sophia sat in Michael's office, watching via secure video conference as Richard Anderson signed away the family mansion, believing he was selling to foreign investors who valued privacy over price. Congratulations, the real estate attorney said on screen. The property transfer is complete. Richard's relief was palpable even through the video. When can I access the funds? They've already been wired to the account you specified. Richard nodded, already focused on his next move, completely unaware that he had just sold his ancestral home to the very woman he'd thrown out of it 5 days earlier. As the video ended, Michael turned to Sophia. It's done. The mansion is yours. Sophia placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling her child move as if in celebration. Not yet, she corrected. First, we have a gala to attend. For the first time since that rainy night, Sophia smiled, not the warm smile that had once charmed Richard, but something sharper, more dangerous. The smile of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. We're going home, she told her unborn child. And this time, no one will ever force us to leave again. Saturday evening descended on Beverly Hills in a wash of golden California sunlight. Limousines and luxury cars lined the circular driveway of the Anderson mansion, disgorging Los Angeles elite movie producers in casual luxury wear, tech moguls in designer sneakers, old money families dripping with understated jewelry. Security guards with earpieces directed traffic while catering staff hurried through side entrances. From the privacy of a black Bentley parked across the street, Sophia observed the spectacle with cool detachment. The home she'd been forcibly removed from just 6 days earlier was now transformed into a glittering venue, with white tents erected on the back lawn and champagne fountains visible through the windows. Ready? Michael asked from the driver's seat. Sophia checked her reflection in the compact mirror. The woman who looked back bore little resemblance to the devastated, rain-soaked figure who had left this house less than a week ago. Her chestnut hair was swept into a sophisticated chignon, her makeup flawless but understated. She wore a black Valentino gown that embraced her pregnancy rather than hiding it, the material draping elegantly over her 6-month belly. Around her neck hung a single piece of jewelry, not the diamond pendant Richard had given Victoria, but a simple platinum chain supporting a small USB drive, disguised as a modern pendant. Ready, she confirmed, tucking the drive back into her dress. Michael came around to open her door, looking impressive himself in a tailored Tom Ford tuxedo. As they approached the mansion's entrance, Sophia noted with satisfaction that Jackson was manning the door, checking invitations. The security chief's eyes widened in shock when he recognized her. Mrs. Anderson, he stammered. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, Sophia replied coolly. But I believe my name is still on the deed of trust, isn't it? Jackson looked trapped between protocol and genuine concern for Sophia, whom he'd always respected. Mr. Anderson left specific instructions. About his estranged wife, Sophia finished for him. I'm sure he did, but perhaps you'd prefer to create a scene by physically removing a pregnant woman from a charity event. I imagine the hospital board members would find that fascinating. From behind Jackson, a voice cut in. It's all right, Jackson, Mrs. Anderson and her friend are welcome. James Anderson stepped forward, extending his hand to Michael with a practiced smile. To anyone watching, it appeared he was graciously welcoming unexpected guests. Only Sophia caught the subtle wink as he led them inside. The grand foyer was filled with guests sipping champagne. The marble floors Sophia had crossed in tears less than a week ago, now covered with red carpet. Conversations paused briefly as heads turned to observe the new arrivals. Whispers immediately spreading through the crowd. Isn't that Richard's wife, the one who left him? I heard she had a breakdown. Who's the man with her? Sophia ignored the whispers, her focus narrowing to the scene at the center of the main hall. There stood Richard, resplendent in a custom tuxedo, one arm possessively around Victoria's waist. The younger woman wore a red gown that left little to the imagination, and on her finger, visible even from a distance, gleamed Sophia's engagement ring. The moment Richard spotted Sophia seemed to unfold in slow motion. His practiced smile froze, then faltered. His complexion paled visibly. Victoria, noticing his reaction, followed his gaze and nearly dropped her champagne flute. My God, Michael murmured beside Sophia. If looks could kill. Richard recovered quickly, excusing himself from his conversation group and cutting through the crowd toward them, with Victoria trailing behind. What the hell are you doing here? He hissed when he reached them, his voice low but venomous. Sophia smiled pleasantly, aware of the curious onlookers. Supporting the children's hospital, of course. Such a worthy cause. You need to leave. Now. Richard's jaw was clenched so tightly a muscle twitched in his cheek. Is that any way to speak to your wife? Richard? Michael interjected smoothly. Especially in front of your esteemed guests. Victoria pushed forward, her surgically enhanced features arranged in a concerned expression. Sophia, sweetie, we're all worried about you. Your doctor called Richard about your episodes. Let us call you a car. My doctor, Sophia raised an eyebrow. How interesting, considering I haven't seen one since being evicted from my home 6 days ago. A nearby couple looked over sharply at the word evicted. Richard noticed and forced a laugh. Always so dramatic, he said loudly enough for others to hear. Come, let's discuss this privately. He gripped Sophia's elbow, attempting to steer her toward his office. But she stood her ground. Actually, she said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention, I believe it's almost time for your speech. Don't let me keep you. On cue, the event coordinator appeared, informing Richard that the presentation would begin in 5 minutes. Richard hesitated, clearly torn between damage control and his scheduled announcement. This isn't over, he warned before allowing himself to be led away. Victoria throwing a venomous look over her shoulder. James materialized at Sophia's side with 2 flutes of sparkling water. Phase 1 complete, he murmured. He's rattled. Good, Sophia replied, accepting the drink. Is everything else in place? James nodded. Mother arrived 10 minutes ago. She's seated in the front row. As always, FBI agents Mills and Rodriguez are here. As my guests, Richard has no idea who they are. Perfect timing, Michael added, checking his watch. The real estate transaction was recorded with the county at 4:30 today. It's official and public record now. The lights dimmed slightly, and the crowd began moving toward the rear garden, where a stage had been set up for the presentation. Sophia, Michael, and James took positions at the back of the audience, perfect for observing while remaining visible to Richard as he took the stage. Richard Anderson was a commanding presence at the podium, his momentary discomfort already masked by the confidence of a man accustomed to adoration. Beside him stood the hospital's chief of pediatrics and the mayor of Beverly Hills. Distinguished guests, Richard began, his voice amplified through the sound system. Welcome to my home, and thank you for supporting the Children's Hospital's new oncology wing. Your generosity tonight will help countless families facing life's greatest challenges. The irony of Richard positioning himself as a champion of children while abandoning his own unborn child was not lost on Sophia. Tonight is also special for another reason, Richard continued. I'm pleased to announce Anderson Global's newest development, Westlake Plaza, a revolutionary mixed-use project that will transform 10 acres of underutilized land into a centerpiece of sustainable luxury. A video began playing on the screen behind him, showing renderings of gleaming towers and green spaces. Richard talked through the presentation, emphasizing job creation and economic benefits, while glossing over the environmental concerns that had previously blocked development. This project represents not just the future of Anderson Global, but my personal future as well, Richard said as the video concluded. His expression softened in a way Sophia once thought genuine, but now recognized as calculated. Life brings unexpected changes. Some of you have heard about my recent personal challenges. A murmur ran through the crowd. Richard reached out a hand toward Victoria, who ascended the stage with practiced grace. I'm grateful for the support of someone who has shown me the meaning of true partnership. Richard continued. Victoria Adams has agreed to become my wife as soon as my current situation is resolved. Gasps and whispers erupted. Even in Hollywood's progressive social circles, publicly announcing an engagement while still married, especially to a visibly pregnant wife, crossed lines of propriety. From her position at the back, Sophia saw Richard's mother stiffen in the front row. And now, Richard continued, oblivious to the discomfort he'd created, I'd like to invite Mayor Collins to say a few words about the zoning changes that will make Westlake Plaza possible. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Sophia nodded to Michael, who slipped away toward the mansion's main control room, where the audio-visual equipment was housed. The mayor was mid-sentence about progress and opportunity when the video screen behind him suddenly changed. Instead of architectural renderings, it displayed a spreadsheet, one of the documents from Sophia's USB drive, detailing payments to the Beverly Hills Zoning Board. The mayor faltered, squinting at the screen in confusion. Richard, his back to the display, didn't immediately notice the change. Victoria tugged urgently at his sleeve. When Richard turned, his face drained of color. The screen changed again, this time showing emails between Richard and offshore accounts. Then a recorded phone conversation with text transcription, where Richard explicitly discussed bribing officials. Chaos erupted. The mayor backed away from Richard as if he were contagious. Event staff rushed to the control booth, but found the door locked from inside. Guests pulled out phones, some recording, others frantically texting. Richard grabbed the microphone. Technical difficulties, he announced, his voice strained. A hacker appears to have the sound system cut off, replaced by Richard's own voice through the speakers. Once the zoning change goes through, we'll flip the property to Anderson Global at 10 times the purchase price. The board will never know I'm behind the original LLC. In the ensuing pandemonium, Sophia calmly made her way to the stage, Michael rejoining her en route. They ascended the steps just as Richard was desperately trying to regain control of the situation. Who's responsible for this? He demanded, looking wildly around until his gaze locked on Sophia. You. Hello? Richard, Sophia said, her voice clear and steady as Michael handed her a wireless microphone that instantly connected to the sound system. The crowd quieted, sensing drama beyond even Hollywood standards. Honored guests, Sophia addressed the audience. I apologize for the unconventional interruption. For those who don't know me, I'm Sophia Wellington Anderson, current wife of your host and mother of his child. She placed a protective hand on her belly. 6 days ago, Richard forced me from this house in the middle of a rainstorm to install his mistress in my place. Victoria stepped forward. That's a lie, you left him. You're mentally unstable. Interesting theory, Sophia replied calmly. Perhaps we should ask the security cameras. She gestured, and the screen changed again, showing footage from the mansion's entrance, Sophia in the rain, Richard throwing the hotel key card, Victoria laughing. A collective gasp rose from the audience. In the front row, Eleanor Anderson, Richard's mother, stood up, her aristocratic features rigid with fury. But my presence tonight isn't about airing dirty laundry, Sophia continued. It's about truth. The documents you saw are real. The Westlake development is built on bribes, fraud, and insider trading. The SEC and IRS have received all this evidence. She nodded toward two serious-looking individuals in the crowd, Agents Mills and Rodriguez, who were already moving toward Richard. Richard's face contorted with rage. "You bitch!" he spat, lunging toward Sophia. Michael stepped between them, but before anything could happen, Jackson and two other security staff intercepted Richard. "Don't touch her, sir," Jackson said firmly. "She's in my house," Richard shouted, struggling against their hold. "Get her out." "Actually," Sophia said, her voice amplified through the sound system, "that's not accurate anymore." She nodded to Michael, who produced a document and handed it to Richard. "This is a certified copy of the property deed recorded today with Los Angeles County. As you can see, ownership of this estate has been transferred from Anderson Holdings LLC to Wellington Restoration Trust." Richard stared at the document in disbelief. "This is impossible. I sold the property to Meridian International yesterday." "Meridian International is a shell company," Michael explained, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Owned by Wellington Restoration Trust, which is controlled by Sophia." The implications dawned on Richard's face in stages: shock, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror. You tricked me into selling you my own house." "Our house," Sophia corrected. "The one you threw me out of. And yes, at 30% below market value. You were quite desperate for cash, weren't you?" From the crowd, Eleanor Anderson pushed her way to the stage. "Richard," she demanded, "what is going on?" Before Richard could answer, the FBI agents reached the stage. "Richard Anderson," Agent Mills announced, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and bribery of public officials." As the agents recited Miranda rights and placed handcuffs on Richard, the crowd erupted in exclamations and the frantic clicking of phone cameras. Victoria backed away from Richard as if his troubles might be contagious, her expression calculating as she assessed the shifting power dynamics. "The ring," Sophia said to her quietly. "It doesn't belong to you." Victoria hesitated, then reluctantly removed the engagement ring, practically throwing it at Sophia before fleeing through the stunned crowd. As Richard was led away, he locked eyes with Sophia one last time. "This isn't over," he threatened. "Actually, it is," Sophia replied. "Your accounts are frozen. The FBI has been investigating you for months. I just gave them the final pieces they needed. Anderson Global's board has already called an emergency meeting." She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "You threw me away like I was nothing. You endangered our child. Now you get to experience exactly what that feels like." Richard's face drained of the last vestiges of color as the full extent of his downfall became clear. The agents led him through the crowd of his peers and business associates, people who had courted his favor just hours earlier and now backed away as if his failure might be contagious. As the commotion continued, Sophia turned to address the remaining guests, many of whom were already edging toward the exits. "Ladies and gentlemen, while this evening has taken an unexpected turn, please remember that the Children's Hospital still needs your support. I'll be honoring all pledges made by Anderson Global, and I encourage you to maintain your commitments as well." She caught sight of Eleanor Anderson, standing rigidly at the edge of the stage, her aristocratic features a mask of conflicting emotions. "Mrs. Anderson," Sophia acknowledged her mother-in-law, "I believe we have much to discuss about your grandchild." Eleanor surveyed Sophia with newfound respect. "Indeed we do," she replied, "perhaps somewhere more private than this circus." As they moved toward the house, James fell into step beside them. "That," he said quietly to Sophia, "was the most terrifying and impressive thing I've ever witnessed." Sophia didn't reply immediately. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was beginning to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But beneath the fatigue was something stronger, a sense of justice restored, of power reclaimed. She paused at the threshold of her mansion now, and looked back at the chaos of the garden party. Camera flashes captured Richard being placed in an FBI vehicle. Guests huddled in groups, frantically updating social media. Catering staff stood frozen, champagne trays still in hand, unsure if the event was continuing. "Welcome home," Michael said softly beside her. Sophia crossed the threshold, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "We're home," she whispered to her unborn child, "and no one will ever take it from us again." 6 months later, Sophia stood in the nursery of the Anderson, now Wellington mansion, sunlight streaming through the redesigned windows. In her arms, 3-month-old Emma slept peacefully, her tiny features perfect in repose. The room had been completely transformed from the half-finished space of before. Gone were the beige walls and conventional decor, replaced by a ceiling painted with constellations and walls featuring hand-drawn forests that seemed to shift and breathe in the changing light. "She's absolutely beautiful," Eleanor Anderson said softly from the doorway. Sophia turned, smiling at her former mother-in-law. Their relationship had evolved into something neither woman could have predicted, not quite friendship, but a respectful alliance centered around Emma. "She has the Anderson chin," Sophia acknowledged, gently placing the sleeping infant in her sustainably sourced crib. "And your determination," Eleanor added. "Even at 3 months, she knows exactly what she wants." After the dramatic events of the gala, which the press had dubbed the Beverly Hills coup, Eleanor had faced a choice: stand by her disgraced son or acknowledge the truth and forge a relationship with her grandchild. To her credit, once presented with evidence of Richard's actions, Eleanor had chosen integrity over blind loyalty. "The board meeting went well?" Sophia asked, knowing Eleanor had just come from Anderson Global headquarters. "Better than expected," Eleanor confirmed. "The rebranding to Wellington Enterprises is proceeding smoothly. The Dubai project is back on schedule, and the revised Westlake development with its affordable housing component has received preliminary approval." The transformation of Anderson Global had been Sophia's most challenging victory. Rather than destroying the company that employed thousands, she had worked with the board to reform it. Richard's 51% controlling interest, frozen by the federal investigation, had been placed in a voting trust controlled jointly by Sophia and James. The company's focus had shifted from luxury developments to mixed-income communities with strong environmental standards projects that were proving both profitable and popular, with investors seeking socially responsible opportunities. "And Richard?" Sophia asked, her voice neutral. Eleanor's expression tightened. "Still maintaining his innocence, still blaming everyone but himself. His lawyers are pushing for a plea deal, but the prosecutors seem determined to make an example of him." She hesitated. "He's asked to see Emma?" "No," Sophia said firmly. "Not until she's old enough to understand who he is and what he did. I won't deny her relationship with her father forever, but it will be on terms that protect her." Eleanor nodded, having expected this answer. "I should go. James is waiting to drive me home." After Eleanor left, Sophia remained in the nursery, watching her daughter sleep. The peace she felt now would have been unimaginable on that rainy night 6 months ago. A soft knock on the doorframe drew her attention. Michael stood there, jacket off, tie loosened. He'd come straight from court. "How was the hearing?" Sophia asked. "The SEC settlement is approved. Anderson Global, sorry. Wellington Enterprises will pay the fine, and all charges against the company will be dropped." He stepped into the room, his voice softening as he noticed Emma asleep. "The whistleblower payment was approved too. 30 million, as we predicted." Sophia nodded. The money mattered less to her now than it once had. She had the mansion, control of the company, and most importantly, her daughter and her dignity. Michael had become a constant in their lives, initially as her attorney and business partner, and gradually as something more personal. They had moved slowly, both aware of the complexities involved, but his steady presence had become essential to her rebuilt life. "I've been thinking," Sophia said, leading him from the nursery to the adjoining sitting room. "The foundation needs a stronger focus. There are so many women like me, maybe not married to billionaires, but trapped in relationships where financial control is used as a weapon. The Wellington New Beginnings Foundation had been established with part of Sophia's settlement, initially focused on supporting pregnant women in crisis, but Sophia had greater ambitions for it. "What are you proposing?" Michael asked, recognizing the determined gleam in her eye. "A comprehensive program, legal support, financial literacy training, temporary housing, childcare assistance, everything I needed when Richard threw me out. But for women without my advantages," Michael smiled. "It's perfect. I know several attorneys who would provide pro bono services." Ekum. Their conversation was interrupted by Sophia's assistant, Claire, appearing with a tablet. "Sorry to interrupt, but you asked to be notified immediately. Victoria Adams just did an exclusive interview with TMZ." Sophia raised an eyebrow. Victoria had vanished after the gala, reportedly fleeing to Europe to escape the scandal. Claire handed over the tablet, where Victoria's surgically enhanced features filled the screen. The headline read, "Billionaire's ex-mistress tells all I was a victim to." Sophia and Michael exchanged glances before playing the video. Victoria, now sporting a more subdued appearance, claimed Richard had manipulated and coerced her, painting herself as another victim of his schemes. "She's looking for a book deal," Michael observed. "Let her have it," Sophia replied, handing back the tablet. "Her story doesn't change mine." Later that evening, Sophia hosted a small dinner party, something that would have been orchestrated by event planners during Richard's era, but was now a casual gathering of genuine friends. James and his partner, David, Eleanor, Michael, and two of Sophia's former Wall Street colleagues who had stood by her through the scandal. As they enjoyed dessert on the terrace overlooking the illuminated gardens, James raised his glass. "To Sophia and Emma, and to fresh starts." The conversation flowed easily, touching on business, politics, the foundation's plans. No one mentioned Richard until Eleanor, preparing to leave, pulled Sophia aside. "He sent this," Eleanor said, handing over a sealed envelope. "I've told him I won't act as his messenger again, but—" She hesitated. "He is still my son." After the guests departed, Sophia stood alone in the master suite redesigned, like the nursery, to erase all traces of its former occupants. The envelope lay unopened on her nightstand. Michael found her there, staring at it. "You don't have to read it," he said quietly. "I know." Sophia picked up the envelope. "But I think I need to." Inside was a single page. Richard's precise handwriting, instantly recognizable. "Sophia, I've had 6 months in here to think about what happened. My lawyers tell me not to write this, that it could be used against me. But I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you. Not just the night I threw you out, but every day before that, when I treated you as an accessory rather than a partner. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm asking that someday, when Emma's older, you'll tell her that her father regrets his failures, that he lost everything that truly mattered because he couldn't see its value until it was gone." Richard Sophia refolded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not discarded, but not given prominence either. It was perhaps the first genuine thing Richard had ever communicated to her. "Are you okay?" Michael asked. "Yes," Sophia replied, and meant it. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Later, after Michael had gone home to his own place, their relationship still evolving, at its careful pace, Sophia checked on Emma one last time. The baby slept peacefully, one tiny hand curled around the ear of the stuffed elephant Sophia had rescued that rainy night. Sophia thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the devastated woman in the rain to the architect of her own restoration. She thought about the foundations she was building for Emma's future, stronger and more authentic than the gilded cage Richard had created. Outside the nursery windows, the lights of Los Angeles glittered like stars fallen to earth. Inside, the constellations painted on the ceiling watched over mother and daughter, a map of possibilities yet to be explored. Sophia Wellington had lost everything in a single night. Then she had taken it all back, and in the process, discovered how much more she was capable of building, not just a home, but a legacy, not just retribution, but renewal. And as she gently closed the nursery door, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that the story she would someday tell Emma wouldn't begin with betrayal. It would begin with courage the moment her mother had stood in the rain, one hand protecting her unborn child, and decided that their story would not be written by someone else's cruelty. It would be a story of falling, yes, but more importantly, it would be a story of rising again, stronger than before, a story still being written, one brave choice at a time.